In studying the rise of the Christian religious right and the re-entry of fundamentalists into the political arena in the 1970s and 80s, I couldn't help but be amazed at the life and legacy of Jerry Falwell, a man who truly was a champion for women and the unborn. This legacy, however, was a journey that began in a very non-political manner, actually. In fact, during the 1950s and 60s, Falwell was quite anti-political in his religious thinking. In his mind, as a fundamentalist, he explained in his autobiography, he believed Christians should not be involved in politics, and he was against religious political activism, even criticizing Martin Luther King Jr. and other Christian blacks for their political activism. However, he completely changed his mind with the life-changing impact that the decision of Roe versus Wade made in 1973 by the Supreme Court, which legalized abortion for all circumstances and up to the third trimester of pregnancy. In his autobiography, Falwell wrote of his, quote, growing concern, growing horror and disbelief at this decision that would legalize the killing of millions of unborn children. He also began to realize and acknowledge regretfully that while the Catholic leaders had courageously been speaking out against abortion and pro-abortion political acts, he and his fellow Protestant believers, especially, he writes, the voices of evangelical and fundamentalist leaders remained silent. And that started to really bother him. Falwell determined that he would no longer be silent in this fundamental issue of the right to life that God, the creator of all life, had given, in which no government or law should declare itself to be in place of God and allow the killing of innocent life. Although Falwell always was strongly pro-life and had preached against abortion and even counseled many men and women on this issue in kind of his private life and in his local church, he realized that this was not enough. He wrote that something far more drastic needed to be done. Through much prayer and seeking, Falwell firmly came to believe, largely from the influence of Francis Schaeffer, that Christian political involvement and activism were necessary to prevent and overturn this legalization of death by abortion. He began earnestly preaching to his congregation and radio and TV audience, calling for an all-out political involvement of the Christian community. The more he read, researched, and learned about the horrors of abortion, both for unborn children and also the lifelong physical, emotional, and spiritual trauma it also inflicted upon women, the more committed Falwell became to Christian social political action. In 1976, Falwell and a group of university students traveled all across America performing a stirring musical called Listen America, along with preaching and prayer services. According to Falwell, this musical presentation was the first offensive we launched to mobilize Christians across America for political action against abortion and other social trends that menace the nation's future. Falwell challenged his fellow fundamentalists and other Christians to become political leaders and to engage the culture head-on through whatever political and legal means they could utilize to change the rising tide of abortion and the moral decay that our nation was seeing. Through his extensive travels, speaking engagements, media appearances, writings, such as his book, Listen America, and tireless calls to action, Falwell inspired Christians and churches across America to enter the political arena and engage their culture through grassroots political movements, but also at the state and national level. In 1979, he co-founded the Moral Majority, a highly influential Christian Republican right-wing political organization that sought religious reforms through political activism. Perhaps the most impressive action, for me anyway, that Falwell took that really demonstrated his true concern for abortion and how much he was willing to not simply preach or politically advocate change, but personally provide the change, was his founding of the Liberty Godparent Home Program. This program is open to any girl or woman in the United States that needs a safe home, counseling, and medical care for their unplanned pregnancy, and has saved untold numbers of babies and provided hope for women all over the United States. By being faithful to God's calling, caring for the people God cares for, and challenging himself to become personally involved and politically involved with the very bloody, heartbreaking, and emotionally draining moral burden of abortion, Jerry Falwell was truly a champion for the unborn and women, and exemplified Jesus' words, "For I tell you the truth, whatever you have done for the least of these, you have done for me."